Hundreds of Tholian warships burned, the once mighty Imperial fleet reduced to ash and slag in mere seconds by the awe-inspiring power of the human battle fleet's impossibly advanced energy weapons. Admiral Sullivan stood on the bridge of the USC Retribution, gazing out at the devastation wrought by humanity's opening salvo. Thousands of human warships, sleek and deadly, hung in formation at the edge of the Tholian system, poised to unleash Armageddon on the heart of the Galactic Empire. For centuries, the arrogant Tholians had sought to subjugate Earth and its colonies, underestimating the indomitable will and relentless ingenuity of the human spirit. But now, after generations of tireless advancement and unrelenting determination, the balance of power had shifted decisively in humanity's favor. The Tholian Emperor Varus, watching the shocking display of human might from his palace on the surface of Tholia Prime, knew he now faced an unwinnable war. His advisors urged him to beg for mercy, to prostrate himself before the human fleet and pray they would spare his worlds. Admiral Sullivan broadcast a galaxy-wide ultimatum on all frequencies, his voice hard as steel. He laid out humanity's grievances against the Empire and demanded nothing less than the unconditional and immediate surrender of all Tholian worlds and military forces. Refusal meant annihilation. Humanity would accept no further threats to its sovereignty and security. The Retribution's weapons, like those of every ship in the human armada, were primed and locked on Tholian targets, ready to unleash a firestorm not seen since the dawn of creation. On the surface, Emperor Varus paced like a caged animal as more reports flooded in of utter devastation. Outposts obliterated, staging worlds burning, the Empire's mightiest battle groups reduced to clouds of irradiated particles expanding across the void. Never in 1,000 years of Imperial dominion had the Tholians faced a foe so technologically advanced, so superior in every way that mattered. The Emperor's pride raged against the bitter reality, but deep down he knew he had but two choices: surrender or watch his empire burn to ash before his eyes. The fate of the Tholian species hung in the balance as the human fleet awaited his answer, their terrible power poised to reshape the galaxy forever. Emperor Varus's eyes blazed with fury as he watched the Tis Indomitable's plasma torpedoes streak toward the human fleet, only to fizzle impotently against the invaders' impenetrable defenses. The Tholian flagship's attack had been an act of desperate defiance, a futile gesture in the face of humanity's overwhelming technological superiority. Varus barely had time to process the failure before the humans unleashed their retaliatory strike. Precision orbital bombardment rained down on Tholia Prime, the human weapons slicing through the planetary shields as if they didn't exist. The Imperial military headquarters vanished in a blinding flash, reduced to molten slag in an instant. The Ministry of Defense collapsed in on itself, burying thousands of Tholian bureaucrats and officers in a tomb of twisted metal and ferrocrete. Fires raged out of control across the capital, the once proud city now a hellscape of destruction and chaos. On the surface, Grand Admiral Zekaris staggered through the ruins of the military complex, his uniform torn and covered in dust. The charred bodies of his soldiers littered the rubble, a grim testament to the price of Tholian arrogance. Zekaris, a hardened veteran of countless campaigns, found himself gripped by an unfamiliar emotion: despair. He had never doubted the might of the Tholian Empire, never questioned its dominion over the lesser races of the galaxy. But now, in the face of humanity's terrifying power, he saw the truth with brutal clarity. The Tholians could not win this war. In the Imperial Palace, Emperor Varus paced like a caged beast, his advisors pleading with him to see reason. Counselor Valaris, his most trusted aide, spoke with quiet urgency. "Your Majesty, we must open negotiations with the humans. Further resistance will only lead to more destruction." Varus rounded on him, eyes wild. "Surrender? To those primitive upstarts? I would rather die than bow before them." But even as he spoke, doubt gnawed at his tenacity. The Empire's secret weapon, the massive battle station with its planet-killer cannon, had been their last hope. But the humans had detected it, struck preemptively with a swarm of impossibly advanced fighter drones. The station, along with any chance of victory, had been vaporized in a blinding flash of light. With his military in ruins and his ultimate weapon destroyed, Emperor Varus finally faced the bitter truth. The Tholian Empire, the greatest power the galaxy had ever known, had been brought to its knees by a race they had once dismissed as primitive savages. There was no choice now but to accept the humiliating terms of surrender. As word of the Emperor's decision spread, Tholian society convulsed with shock and anger. Riots erupted in the streets of the capital, citizens venting their rage and disbelief. Some called for Varus to be removed, seeing his surrender as a betrayal of Tholian honor. Amidst the turmoil, a shadowy figure saw opportunity. Lord Kalis, the fanatical leader of a fringe nationalist group, began gathering allies for a bold plan. He would overthrow the Emperor, seize control of the Empire, and continue the war against the humans at any cost. Hardliners and disaffected military officers flocked to his banner, eager to restore Tholian pride. As the human fleet maintained its threatening vigil in orbit, the stage was set for a momentous meeting between Admiral Sullivan and Emperor Varus aboard the human flagship. The fate of the Tholian Empire, and perhaps the galaxy itself, would be decided in that fateful encounter. But even as the two leaders prepared to negotiate, dark forces plotted in the shadows, determined to alter the course of history. The thunderous roar of explosions shattered the tense silence that had fallen over Tholia Prime. Lord Kalis's nationalist forces surged through the streets of the capital, their battle cries echoing off gleaming spires now marred by smoke and debris. Inside the Imperial Palace, the clash of energy weapons and the acrid smell of ozone filled the air as Kalis's strike team engaged the Emperor's loyalist guards in fierce close-quarters combat. Emperor Varus stumbled through a hidden passage, his ornate robes singed and torn. His elite bodyguards formed a protective circle around him, their eyes darting warily as they guided their sovereign to safety. The secret tunnel shuddered with each impact above, dust and small debris raining down on the fleeing group. "This way, Your Majesty," urged Captain Jen, the leader of Varus's personal guard. They emerged from the tunnel into a nondescript alleyway, the sounds of battle still uncomfortably close. A waiting skimmer, its stealth systems engaged, whisked them away towards the outskirts of the city. High above the planet's surface, Admiral Sullivan watched the unfolding chaos with a mixture of fascination and wariness. The bridge of the USC Retribution was abuzz with activity as officers analyzed real-time data streaming in from their advanced sensor arrays. "Sir," reported his XO Commander Chen, "we're detecting multiple firefights across the capital and spreading to other major population centers. It appears the Tholian military is fracturing, with different units declaring allegiance to various factions." Sullivan nodded grimly. "And the Emperor?" "Our sensors tracked him leaving the palace through a concealed exit. He appears to be en route to a fortified location outside the city." Before Sullivan could respond, a priority communication alert flashed on his command console. "Admiral," the AI interface announced, "incoming transmission from the surface. The sender identifies himself as Zoran Talek, leader of a Tholian rebel faction." Sullivan's eyes narrowed. "Put him through." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the face of a Tholian male. His carapace bore intricate markings denoting high social status, but there was a fierce intensity in his multifaceted eyes that spoke of a revolutionary zeal. "Admiral Sullivan," Talek began, his translator conveying a tone of urgency, "I represent a growing movement within Tholian society. We seek to end this war and forge a new path for our people, one of peace and cooperation with humanity." Sullivan kept his expression neutral. "An admirable goal, Talek, but why should I trust you?" "Because we share a common enemy," Talek replied. "The old guard, represented by Varus and Kalis alike, would see our civilization burn to ashes rather than admit defeat. We've been working in the shadows for years, building support among the populace. Now, with your fleet in orbit, we have the opportunity to reshape the very foundations of Tholian society." The Admiral considered the rebels' words carefully. The offer was tempting, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Talek might have ulterior motives. Still, an alliance with a native faction could prove invaluable in stabilizing the planet and securing a lasting peace. "I'm willing to hear you out," Sullivan said finally, "but I want to meet in person. No tricks, no ambushes. You'll come aboard my flagship under a flag of truce. Talek nodded solemnly. Agreed. I'll transmit coordinates for a secure pickup location. And Admiral, thank you for this opportunity. Together we can end centuries of conflict and build a better future for both our peoples. As the transmission ended, Sullivan turned to his XO. Prep a shuttle and a security detail, and keep our weapons locked on every major military installation down there. If this is some kind of trap, I want to be ready to reduce this planet to a molten ball of rock. Meanwhile, in a fortified bunker complex outside the Tholian capital, Emperor Varys paced furiously. Banks of monitors displayed scenes of carnage from across his crumbling empire. Cities burned, soldiers turned on one another, and the symbols of imperial might lay shattered in the streets. "This is intolerable!" Varys snarled, smashing his fist into a nearby console. "Where is my fleet? Where are my loyal legions?" Grand Admiral Zecharies, his uniform stained with blood and grime, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, our forces are in disarray. Many have sided with Kahless, others are simply deserting their posts. We still have some loyal units, but they're scattered and cut off from Central Command." Varys's eyes blazed with fury. "Then rally them! I want Kahless's head on a pike, and I want every traitor who supported him publicly executed." As Zecharies hurried to comply, a junior officer burst into the command center. "Your Majesty, Lord Kahless is broadcasting on all frequencies." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing the face of the nationalist leader. Kahless's features were set in a mask of relentless drive as he addressed the Tholian people. "Citizens of the Empire, for too long we have suffered under the weak leadership of Varys and his corrupt regime. They would have us kneel before human oppressors, abandoning millennia of Tholian greatness. I say no more. Join me, brothers and sisters, in casting off the chains of tyranny. Together, we will drive the human invaders from our skies and restore the glory of the Tholian race." As Kahless's impassioned speech continued, the streets of Tholia Prime erupted into even greater chaos. Nationalist sympathizers clashed with loyalist forces, while opportunistic criminal elements took advantage of the breakdown in order to loot and pillage. The once mighty Tholian Empire, brought low by human technological superiority, now tore itself apart from within. And high above it all, the sleek warships of humanity's fleet hung in silent vigilance, their weapons primed and ready to unleash apocalyptic fury at a moment's notice. As Admiral Sullivan prepared to meet with the rebel leader, Talek, the fate of two civilizations hung in the balance. The galaxy watched and waited, knowing that the next few hours would shape the course of history for centuries to come. The shuttle bay of the USC Retribution hummed with tension as Admiral Sullivan awaited the arrival of Zoran Talek. Marine guards stood at attention, their powered armor gleaming under the harsh lights. Sullivan clasped his hands behind his back, steeling himself for the diplomatic tightrope he was about to walk. The Tholian craft touched down with a soft hiss of landing struts. As the hatch cycled open, Sullivan's eyes widened slightly. Zoran Talek emerged, her carapace adorned with intricate patterns that shimmered as she moved. The rebel leader's multifaceted eyes scanned the bay before settling on the admiral. "Welcome aboard the Retribution," Sullivan said, his voice carefully neutral. "I trust your journey was uneventful?" Talek inclined her head. "Thank you, Admiral. The skies above Tholia Prime are anything but peaceful these days. I appreciate your guarantee of safe passage." Sullivan led Talek to a nearby conference room, the door sealing behind them with a pneumatic whoosh. As they sat across from each other, the weight of history pressed down upon both leaders. "You spoke of reshaping Tholian society," Sullivan began. "I'm interested in hearing more about your vision and what you're prepared to offer in return for our support." Talek's mandibles clicked softly as she chose her words. "My faction represents a new generation of Tholians. We've seen the cost of our empire's expansionist policies. We seek a future of cooperation, of cultural exchange. In practical terms, we can provide your forces with detailed intelligence on military installations, access codes, patrol routes." Sullivan leaned forward. "And in return?" "Your aid in removing both Varys and Kahless from power, a gradual withdrawal of human forces once stability is restored. And, Talek hesitated, a seat at the Galactic table as equals, not conquered subjects. The Admiral's eyes hardened. Let me be clear, Talek. While I'm open to an alliance of convenience, the goal remains the same. Total Tholian capitulation. Your Empire's days of independence are over. Before Talek could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Commander Chen's voice crackled over the intercom. Admiral, to the bridge. We're detecting massive energy signatures on the surface. It looks like Kahless has launched an all-out assault on the Emperor's bunker. Sullivan rose swiftly. It seems events are forcing our hand, Talek. Are you with us or not? On Tholia Prime, the night sky blazed with weapons fire. Lord Kahless stood atop an armored command vehicle, his eyes gleaming with fanatical zeal as he surveyed the battle before him. The Emperor's fortified bunker loomed in the distance, its energy shields flickering under the relentless barrage of nationalist artillery. Forward! Kahless roared, his voice carrying over the din of combat. For the glory of Tholia! Inside the bunker, Emperor Varys stumbled as another impact shook the facility. Grand Admiral Zikaris steadied him, concern etched on his features. Your Majesty, we can't hold out much longer. Our outer defenses are collapsing, and we've lost contact with half our remaining forces. Varys snarled in frustration, but the fire had gone out of his eyes. What options remain? Zekaris hesitated. There may be one possibility, but you won't like it. Minutes later, a heavily encrypted transmission cut through the electromagnetic chaos of the battlefield. In a secret bunker across the city, Zoran Talek's eyes widened as she received the Emperor's desperate plea for assistance. As dawn broke over the smoke-filled skies of Tholia Prime, 3 Tholian factions now vied for control of a crumbling empire. And in orbit above, humanity's warships waited, their weapons primed to rewrite the galaxy's balance of power. Commander Jake Holloway crouched in the shadows of a massive ion cannon, his team of human special forces operatives spread out around the perimeter. The distant rumble of artillery fire provided cover for their approach. Holloway's augmented vision highlighted structural weak points as he signaled his demolitions expert forward. Charges set, sir, the soldier whispered. On your command. Holloway nodded grimly. Light it up. The explosion ripped through the night, the once mighty ion cannon collapsing in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. As alarms blared across the defense grid, Holloway's team melted back into the darkness, leaving chaos in their wake. Across the planet, similar strikes crippled Tholian military infrastructure. The carefully orchestrated sabotage campaign sent shockwaves through both nationalist and loyalist ranks. In the Tholian High Command, a frantic officer burst into Lord Kahless's war room. My lord, we've detected human strike teams on the surface. They've taken out our southern defense perimeter. Kahless's eyes blazed with fury. Talek, he hissed, that traitor has invited the aliens onto our sacred soil. He turned to his assembled generals. Spread the word to every citizen, every soldier still loyal to Tholia. Talek and her human masters seek to enslave us all. As propaganda broadcasts flooded Tholian communications channels, Emperor Varys found himself in an unthinkable position. Huddled in a makeshift command center, he faced the rebel leader he had once sought to crush. I never thought I'd see the day, Varys said bitterly, when I'd be forced to beg for aid from the likes of you. Talek's expression remained impassive. The galaxy is changing, Your Majesty. We must change with it, or be swept aside. Varys's mandibles clicked in agitation. And what price do you demand for your assistance? Not what you might think, Talek replied. I seek no personal power. What I want is a future for our people, one that doesn't end with Tholia as a smoldering ruin or a human protectorate. As the 2 lifelong enemies began to tentatively explore the possibility of cooperation, neither was aware of the encrypted transmissions already racing toward the human fleet. Admiral Sullivan reviewed the latest intelligence reports, a grim smile playing across his features. It seems our Tholian friends are finally ready to talk, he murmured. Helm, set a course for the coordinates they've provided. It's time to bring this war to an end, on our terms. The USC Retribution's council chamber hummed with tension as the Tholian factions gathered. Admiral Sullivan stood at the head of the table, his resolute expression sweeping over the assembled delegates. Emperor Varus and Zoran Talek sat to one side, their chitinous forms rigid with apprehension. Across from them, Lord Kaelus's multifaceted eyes glittered with awe-inspiring fury. "Let these negotiations commence," Sullivan began, his voice carrying the weight of humanity's might. "We are here to discuss the terms of Tholia's surrender and the future governance of your worlds." Talek leaned forward, her mandibles clicking softly. "We propose a power-sharing agreement between our factions, Admiral, a united Tholian front to work alongside human authorities in—" "Treachery!" Kaelus surged to his feet, cutting her off. "You would hand our sovereignty to these alien invaders? I will not stand for it." The nationalist leader lunged across the table, his clawed appendages reaching for Emperor Varus's throat. In an instant, human marines materialized from hidden alcoves, their weapons trained on Kaelus. "Stand down!" Sullivan's command cracked like a whip. The room froze, teetering on the edge of violence. Kaelus slowly retreated, his eyes darting between the impassive faces of the human soldiers. "You see?" he hissed. "They seek to subjugate us all." Sullivan's patience snapped. He activated a holographic display, showcasing the human fleet in orbit. "Enough. You seem to have forgotten your position, Lord Kaelus. Allow me to remind you." With a gesture, the Admiral opened a channel to his flagship. "This is Sullivan. Execute Operation Thunderstrike." Across Tholian space, pinpoint beams of energy lanced down from human warships. The remaining Tholian defense installations erupted in flames, their destruction visible even from the planet's surface. The council chamber trembled as shockwaves rippled through the capital. "That," Sullivan said coldly, "was but a fraction of our capabilities. You have one chance, to avoid the complete annihilation of your civilization. Surrender, unconditionally, now." Emperor Varus slumped in his seat, the fight draining from his posture. He looked at Talek, then at the smoldering ruins visible through the chamber's viewport. With trembling appendages, he reached for the datapad Sullivan slid across the table. "I, Emperor Varus, hereby surrender the Tholian Empire and all its territories to human governance," he intoned, his voice barely above a whisper as he signed the document. Kaelus howled in rage, his followers surging forward. "Death before dishonor!" he roared, charging at Varus with murderous intent. The crack of human weaponry filled the air. Kaelus stumbled, his carapace punctured by precision fire. He collapsed at Varus's feet, twitching and leaking ichor. The remaining nationalists found themselves swiftly subdued, manacled by efficient human soldiers. As the chaos subsided, Zoran Talek stepped forward. "Admiral Sullivan," she said, her voice steady despite the carnage, "I offer my services as interim leader of a Tholian transitional authority. We must work together to restore order and implement human governance." Sullivan nodded, studying the rebel leader carefully. "Agreed. You'll work closely with our administrative teams to facilitate a smooth transition." As the human officials began outlining their plans for Tholian integration, Talek's outer calm masked inner turmoil. She had sought change for her people, yes, but not like this. Not under the boot of an alien power. While Sullivan spoke of infrastructure and security measures, Talek's mind raced. The surface of Tholia Prime might be pacified, but in the depths of the planet's vast cave systems, pockets of resistance still smoldered. Perhaps, in time, those embers could be fanned into a flame of true independence. For now, though, Talek nodded along with Sullivan's directives. She would play the part of the cooperative local leader, and she would wait. Bide her time, gathering intelligence and waiting for the right moment to strike. Months passed. The veneer of peace on Tholia Prime wore thin as human occupation forces tightened their grip. In the sprawling metropolis of Zalcora, Talek stood before a gathering of her provisional council, her carapace dulled with exhaustion. "The humans have demanded we increase patrols in the southern districts," she announced, her multifaceted eyes scanning the room. "They believe insurgent cells are operating from the abandoned crystal mines." Councillor Vex clicked his mandibles in agitation. "And you would have us comply? We are becoming nothing more than alien lapdogs. Before Talek could respond, an explosion rocked the building. Alarms blared as smoke billowed through shattered windows. Outside, the staccato of weapons fire filled the air. "We're under attack," a guard shouted, rushing into the chamber. "Insurgents have breached the perimeter." Talek's instincts took over. "Evacuate the building," she ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Get the council to safety." As they hurried through twisting corridors, Talek's mind raced. The attack's brazenness spoke of growing desperation among the resistance. Or perhaps... Her thoughts were interrupted as they emerged into the courtyard. A human security detachment had already arrived, their sleek combat armor gleaming in the harsh Tholian sun. "This way, Madam Administrator," a gruff sergeant beckoned. "We'll get you to a secure location." Talek hesitated, her compound eyes taking in the mix of human and Tholian personnel. The lines between protector and occupier blurred with each passing day. Across the city, Admiral Sullivan stood in the command center of the human garrison, his face grim as reports flooded in. The assault on the Transitional Authority building was just one of many coordinated strikes. "Sir," a communications officer called out, "we're getting reports of attacks on our outposts in the Golthar system and Nix Prime." Sullivan's teeth clenched. "Patch me through to Fleet Command. We need reinforcements now." As the Admiral issued rapid-fire orders, a seed of doubt took root. The occupation had seemed straightforward at first, a matter of overwhelming force and efficient administration. Now, facing an enemy that melted into the shadows between strikes, victory felt less certain. In the vast crystal caverns beneath Zalcora, a group of Tholian insurgents huddled around a makeshift command center. Their leader, a battle-scarred veteran of the Imperial forces, studied a holographic map of human military installations. "The attack on the human command post was a success," he announced, his mandibles clicking in satisfaction. "We've shown them we can strike at the heart of their power." A younger insurgent leaned forward eagerly. "What's our next move, Commander?" The scarred Tholian's eyes gleamed with fanatical intensity. "We escalate. The humans believe they can break our will, turn us into docile subjects. We'll show them the true strength of Tholia." As plans for further strikes took shape, none of the insurgents noticed the small drone hovering silently in a shadowed crevice, its sensors recording every word. Back in the heart of Zalcora, Zoran Talek stood at the window of her new, heavily fortified office. The city sprawled before her, a maze of crystalline spires and twisting streets. Human dropships patrolled overhead, a constant reminder of their liberator's watchful gaze. A priority communication chimed, the Admiral's stern visage appearing on her console. "Administrator Talek," Sullivan's voice was clipped, "we need to talk about your government's failure to contain these insurgent attacks." Talek straightened, her tone carefully neutral. "Of course, Admiral. I'm at your disposal." As the conversation began, Talek's mind whirled with calculations. The balance of power was shifting, the situation growing more volatile by the day. She would have to navigate carefully to keep her people's hopes for true independence alive. In orbit high above, the USS Retribution's powerful sensors swept the planet's surface, hunting for any sign of the elusive insurgent bases. The great warship was a looming reminder of humanity's technological superiority, and of the uncertain future that lay ahead for both occupiers and occupied in this brave new galaxy. The fragile piece shattered like a crystalline dome under immense pressure. Zyrax's attack on the High Command headquarters sent shockwaves through the occupied Tholian worlds. Admiral Sullivan stood amid the smoking ruins of what had been his command center, his face ashen as he surveyed the carnage. "Sir," a blood-spattered aide approached, "preliminary casualty reports are coming in. It's bad." Sullivan's fists clenched. "How many?" "Over 200 confirmed dead, sir, including most of the senior staff." The Admiral's eyes hardened. "Get me a secure line to Governor Malik, now." Within hours, human dropships swarmed over Tholian cities. Streets emptied as civilians scrambled for shelter. In Zalcora, Zoran Talek watched helplessly as armored personnel carriers rumbled past her office. "This is madness," she hissed, turning to her advisors. "We must appeal to Sullivan before—" The door burst open. A squad of human soldiers stormed in, weapons raised. "Administrator Talek," the lead trooper barked, "by order of Governor Malik, you are relieved of duty. Come with us." Across the sector, detention centers filled to bursting. Tholian prisoners huddled in cramped cells, their multifaceted eyes reflecting fear and confusion. Governor Malik strode through one such facility, his face a mask of iron will. "Every Tholian is a potential enemy," he declared to the assembled human officers. "We will root out this insurgency by any means necessary." Admiral Sullivan's holocom flickered to life, Talek's agitated form materializing before him. "Admiral, you must stop this. Malik's actions will only breed more resentment, more violence." Sullivan's expression remained impassive. "I'm sorry, Zorn, but after what happened, we can't take any chances." As the transmission cut off, Sullivan slumped in his chair. The weight of lost comrades and the uncertain path ahead settled heavily upon him. In the shadows of Tholar II's sprawling underground caverns, Xyrax addressed his followers. The warlord's scarred carapace gleamed in the dim light of bioluminescent fungi. "Our strike has dealt a crushing blow to the human oppressors," he chittered triumphantly. "Now we must press our advantage. Prepare the next wave of attacks." Fanatical cheers echoed through the cavern. None noticed the near-invisible surveillance drone nestled in a crevice overhead, silently relaying their plans to Ghost Team's waiting ears. Commander Holloway studied the incoming data, his cybernetic eye whirring as it processed the intelligence. "We have them," he growled to his squad. "Prep for immediate deployment. No prisoners this time." As Ghost Team geared up for their grim task, the occupied Tholian worlds teetered on the precipice of a new and terrible phase of conflict. The veneer of a clean victory had been stripped away, revealing the messy, brutal reality of subjugation and resistance. The Retribution's bridge hummed with tension as Admiral Sullivan stared at the incoming transmission. Governor Malik's face filled the view screen, his eyes cold and calculating. "Admiral, you are hereby ordered to relinquish command and report to Earth for debriefing." Malik's voice dripped with barely concealed contempt. "Your lenient approach to the Tholian situation is no longer acceptable." Sullivan's mind focused. "Governor, with all due respect, I cannot comply. Our mandate was to liberate the Tholians, not crush them under an iron fist." "Then you leave me no choice," Malik sneered. The transmission cut off abruptly. Sullivan turned to his crew, their faces a mix of persistence and uncertainty. "Send out the call. All ships loyal to our original mission are to rendezvous at the edge of the Tholia system." As the Retribution broke orbit, Sullivan's mind raced. He had known this confrontation was coming, but the reality of it still stung. His eyes swept over the tactical display, watching as friendly indicators began converging on their position. On the planet below, Zoran Talek paced her office, the weight of an impossible decision pressing down on her. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she called. One of her advisors rushed in, mandibles clicking nervously. "Administrator, we've received word. Sullivan's fleet is mobilizing. Malik demands we publicly denounce the Admiral as a traitor." Talek's compound eyes narrowed. "And if we refuse?" The advisor's carapace seemed to pale. "He implied there would be severe consequences." Talek moved to the window, gazing out at the human dropships patrolling the skies of Zalcora. She had to act, but every choice seemed fraught with danger. "Contact our friends in the Resistance," she said quietly. "We may need their support sooner than we thought." In the vast underground caverns of Tholar II, Xyrax received Talek's encoded message. The scarred warlord chittered in amusement. "So, the humans turn on each other," he mused. "Perhaps we can use this chaos to our advantage." One of his lieutenants stepped forward. "My lord, what of Talek's request for alliance?" Xyrax's eyes glinted in the dim, bioluminescent light. "For now, we watch. Let them bleed each other dry. Then we strike." Back in orbit, Sullivan's fleet grew. Tholian ships, their crystalline hulls glittering against the stars, took up formation alongside human vessels. The admiral allowed himself a small smile at the sight. His tactical officer's voice cut through the moment. "Sir, we're detecting multiple launches from the surface. Malik's forces are mobilizing." Sullivan nodded grimly. "All ships, battle stations. We hold position, but do not fire unless fired upon." On Earth, the halls of power buzzed with activity. Defense Minister Carver banged his head on the conference table. "Sullivan is in open rebellion," he roared. "We must crush this insurrection before it spreads." A junior aide cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, we're receiving reports from the Tholian worlds. Many are calling Sullivan a hero, saying he's the only one standing between them and Malik's brutality." Carver's eyes narrowed. "Malik assured me his methods were necessary, effective." "The reports suggest otherwise, sir," the aide continued. "Detention centers overflowing, civilian unrest growing. Even some of our own personnel are expressing doubts." The defense minister's face darkened. He keyed his comm unit. "Get me a direct line to Malik, now." As tensions mounted across the sector, the pieces were set for a confrontation that would shape the future of human-Tholian relations. In the void between worlds, Sullivan's fleet stood ready, a thin line between two very different visions of peace. Aboard the Retribution, Sullivan studied the tactical display. Malik's forces were arrayed before them, weapons hot. The next move would determine everything. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the surface. It's the former Emperor Varus." Sullivan's eyebrows raised in surprise. "On screen." The once proud ruler appeared, his carapace dulled and cracked. "Admiral Sullivan," Varus began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I implore you, do not let Malik's madness destroy everything. Only through dialogue can there be true peace." As Varus spoke, alerts blared across the bridge. Malik's ships were powering weapons, moving into attack formation. The moment of truth had arrived. The bridge of the Retribution erupted into chaos as Malik's ships opened fire. Sullivan barked orders, his crew scrambling to return fire and raise shields. The former Emperor Varus's plea for peace was drowned out by the cacophony of battle. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship. "Sir, we've got multiple hull breaches," the tactical officer shouted. "Security reports Tholian commandos have boarded." Sullivan's eyes widened. How the hell did they get past our defenses? Before anyone could respond, the bridge doors exploded inward. Tholian commandos poured through the smoke, their crystalline bodies glinting as they opened fire with exotic weapons. "Protect the Admiral," Sullivan's security chief roared, diving in front of his commander as energy bolts tore through the air. On Tholia Prime, Zoran Talek limped through the ruins of the command bunker, her carapace cracked and oozing ichor. The suicide bombing had decimated her staff and left the transitional government in tatters. "Administrator," a wounded aide called out, "Malik's forces are advancing on the capital. We need to evacuate." Talek's compound eyes narrowed. "No, we make our stand here." A shadow fell across the rubble-strewn floor. Talek turned to see a familiar figure emerge from the smoke. "Calthar," she hissed, recognizing her old nemesis. The Imperial operative's mandibles clicked in a cruel approximation of a smile. "It's time to end this, Talek." Aboard the Retribution, Sullivan fought hand-to-hand with a Tholian commando. The alien's crystalline exoskeleton gave it formidable strength, but Sullivan's combat training allowed him to hold his own. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're getting reports of widespread attacks on the surface. Malik's forces are moving on the capital." Sullivan slammed the commando's head into a console, stunning it momentarily. "We can't let Malik seize control. Target his ground forces and open fire." "But sir, that's a populated area." "Do it," Sullivan roared, "or we lose everything we fought for." As the Retribution's weapons rained fire on the Tholian capital, Talek and Calthar engaged in a deadly duel. Despite her injuries, Talek's fierce dedication allowed her to match the assassin blow for blow. "You're fighting for a dead empire, Calthar?" Talek snarled, ducking under a vicious swipe. Better to die for something than live for nothing, Calthar retorted, pressing his attack. Their battle carried them through the ruins of the command bunker, a microcosm of the larger conflict tearing apart their world. In orbit, Sullivan's loyalist fleet clashed with Malik's hardliners. On the ground, Talek's beleaguered security forces fought desperately against the governor's troops. As the fires of conflict raged, the future of human-Tholian relations hung in the balance. The actions of a few key individuals in these crucial moments would shape the destiny of two species. The dust settled on Tholia Prime as Talek stood over Calthar's motionless form. She allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction before the reality of their situation crashed back upon her. "Administrator," her aide's voice crackled through her damaged communicator. "We've lost contact with the southern hemisphere. Malik's forces are—" The transmission cut off abruptly. Talek's compound eyes narrowed as she surveyed the ruined command bunker. The battle was just getting started. In orbit, Admiral Sullivan wiped blood from his brow as the last of the Tholian commandos fell. The bridge of the Retribution was a scene of carnage, but they had held. "Status report," he barked. "Sir, Malik's fleet is in retreat," his tactical officer responded. "But we're detecting multiple launches from the Tholian moon Calvor." Sullivan's eyes widened. "Calvor? That's supposed to be an uninhabited outpost." Before he could process this new development, alarms blared across the ship. "Incoming missiles! Biosignatures detected!" "Intercept them!" Sullivan roared, but it was too late. On the planet's surface, Talek watched in horror as streaks of light rained down from the sky. The missiles impacted with sickening thuds, releasing clouds of sickly green vapor. "No," she whispered, realizing the implications. Within hours, reports flooded in from across Tholia Prime. Humans and Tholians alike collapsed in the streets, their bodies racked with unimaginable agony. The virus spread with terrifying speed, overwhelming medical facilities and shattering any hope of containment. Sullivan and Talek, isolated in their respective command centers, received the grim news. An extinction-level bioweapon had been unleashed, engineered to target both species indiscriminately. "We've traced the launch site," Sullivan's intelligence officer reported. "A hidden Imperial facility on Calvor, led by a Tholian scientist named Arcalis." Talek's mandibles clicked in recognition. "Arcalis? I knew him. A brilliant mind, but dangerously unstable. We should have seen this coming." As the death toll mounted, Sullivan and Talek faced an impossible choice. The virus was spreading too quickly to evacuate. Quarantine would doom millions to an agonizing death. The only option left was unthinkable. "We can't let this spread beyond the system," Sullivan said, his voice heavy with the weight of what he was proposing. Talek's compound eyes met his gaze through the holographic transmission. "I know," she replied softly. We must do what is necessary." With heavy hearts, they gave the order. The human fleet's doomsday protocol was activated. Across Tholia Prime and its colonies, massive energy signatures bloomed as the bombardment began. Cities vanished in blinding flashes. Continents were scoured clean. The screams of the dying were silenced as cleansing fire swept across the cradle of Tholian civilization. From the bridge of the Retribution, Sullivan watched the inferno engulf the world below. Tears streamed down his face as he witnessed the horrific price of their failure. In her makeshift bunker, Talek felt the ground shake as her homeworld was consumed. She closed her eyes, allowing herself one moment of grief before steeling herself for what was to come. As the fires of Tholia Prime burned, a cold realization settled over both leaders. Their conflict, their pride, their inability to find common ground, all of it had led to this moment. In their battle for control, they had lost everything. The quarantine beacons activated, sealing off the Tholia system. As the last of the evacuation ships jumped to safety, Sullivan and Talek knew their work was nowhere near the end. Somehow, they would have to rebuild from this catastrophe and ensure such horrors were never repeated. But first, they had a reckoning to face. Somewhere in the ruins of Calvor, Arcalis still lurked, and as long as he lived, the threat of his madness remained.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, Please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.